So yes, to answer the first question, yes, I am full remote now.
Cool. Okay. Yeah.
Hmm.
Awesome. And then what was the second? Did I ask a two-part question? Hi, my name's Nick Cosentino, and I'm a Principal Software Engineering Manager at Microsoft. In this interview, I was joined by Eric Roby, who shared his career journey as well as his experience as a software engineer, primarily as a consultant. Now, there's a lot of really helpful tips in this interview, especially because there's focus on remote work as well as how you can handle communication. And there's something in there for junior engineers as well. Now, I really admire Eric. He's an excellent content creator and a very successful course creator as well. This conversation for me was a lot of fun, and I think that there's a lot of knowledge that you can take away from this. So, thanks so much for watching. Sit back, enjoy, and I'll see you next time. Are you fully remote then, or in
Yeah,
office?
so I'm remote. I used to go in the office, so my world was also kind of weird with that, where I work at a company called Willow Tree, which is a pretty big consulting company, and we like specialize in, well, we're kind of changing right now a little bit in some ways, but what we mostly specialized before was public facing apps. So a lot of
Okay.
a lot of people are using like a lot of unique users each month and all that kind of stuff. So, but we had branches scattered in different areas of the United States at one point. So we would like go into the office to work remote for like a company. And it was just a bunch of like goofy stuff. I thought, like, instead of just being remote here and then like working with your team remote, we would also like go to the office and work remote with your team for a remote client. And it
Okay.
was just, you know what I mean? So a lot of remoteness going on anyway. So it was ended up being like a really good match to be able to just do it full remote. So yes, to answer the first question, yes, I am full remote now.
Cool. Okay. Yeah.
Hmm.
Awesome. And then what was the second? Did I ask a two-part question?
No, I don't think so. It was just am I
Okay.
remote now? Yeah.
Oh, no, okay. I was like, wait a second, am I?
No,
Yeah,
no, you're
because
good.
I mean, for a lot of people, that's like either been a huge shift, like going over the past couple of years, right, going fully remote. But was that always the case for you then? Like when you were working at this company, it's kind of been set up that way the whole time, or was that a shift during the pandemic?
Yeah, that was a shift during the pandemic. So, I have like a little over 9 years experience, like
Okay.
professionally. So I started, so we like went way back. My father had like his own consulting company back in the early 2000s, late 90s. So I was kind of in the coding world then. So I was kind of introduced to coding early, where I would actually do some remote development for his company. So like when I was like
Got it. Okay.
13, 14 years old, he would have a company where he would go into the office, into the client, and then I would also help him code a little bit during the day, like on summer and things like that.
That's
So
cool.
I was really able to kind of learn, one, kind of working alone remotely, because my dad wasn't always there. And it kind of got me exposure to programming in general for enterprise companies. I later on got my computer science degree and started working at a company where I did have to go into the office every single day. And that was a good experience, especially when you're newer. Like I was
Hmm.
working with my dad's company for a little bit, but working in the office, definitely when you're more like on the junior side of things, I think is a really beneficial. I was able to surround myself with some awesome people, awesome mentors. I was lucky to have awesome leadership as well, which really was able to propel my career. Um, and then my current company, we were in the office 5 days a week when we first joined. And then during COVID, we all went remote, and then we went to like a hybrid solution. And now I'm on a branch that is remote, but the whole company is not remote. So,
Okay. Interesting. And I like your point. So about juniors getting started and stuff and how it can be beneficial to be in person. Like I'm not the kind of person that's going to say like, hey, like a company has to work one way or the other. Like, being fully remote is, clearly better than being fully in office or the other way. I think there's benefits to both. But something I've observed, especially with more junior folks, is like if you have if you're very comfortable as a junior and able to reach out and like at any point you're like, I have a question, I want to talk with someone, and you're comfortable reaching out to people, I think that like getting onboarded remote and stuff, getting started remote isn't so bad because like you're getting over those barriers. But if you're hesitant at all, or you're like, I don't want to bother people, or maybe I should think about this a little bit longer, and it's like, 2-3 days before you get any help. Like, I think for those types of individuals, it can be very challenging to
Mhm.
get like some momentum in the beginning. But is that kind of like what you've observed as well? But before we move on, this is just a reminder that I do have courses available on DomeTrain if you want to level up in your C# programming. If you head over to DomeTrain, you can see that I have a course bundle that has my Getting Started and Deep Dive courses on C#. Between the two of these, that's 11 hours of programming in the C# language, taking you from absolutely no programming experience to being able to build basic applications. You'll learn everything about variables, loops, a bit of async programming, and object-oriented programming as well. Make sure to check it out.
Yeah, so speaking from just like my personal experience, like you said, like
Sure.
everyone's different. Me being in the office when I was newer helped tremendously because like if it's your first time working in enterprise applications, there's a lot of like things that make enterprise applications different than like your side project, right? There's
Yep.
a lot more scalability happening. Either there might be like code that you've never seen before, just a lot of things that are different, and especially if it's legacy applications, right? I mean, that's like a whole different ball game. And I know when I was a junior, it helped tremendously being able to sit right next to. So right next to me was a staff engineer, and then right across from me was my engineering manager. And
True.
I was lucky enough that the staff engineer wanted to help me grow, wanted to be there for me. So he would always be able to push me in the right direction. And if I ever got stuck, he was right there to kind of point to the folder or point to the business logic that was making whatever happened. And I know me personally, that helped tremendously because there was things that like I can't think of it off the top of my head, but I remember like having
Yep.
like aha moments, like puzzles were connecting of like, oh, I didn't even know this worked with this, or maybe the first time you see actually like real life dependency injection in code and you're like, I don't have to create every object or, like things like that.
Yeah.
And like,
How does this work? Yeah.
or like if you're doing like side projects and stuff, you might not like understand certain words, like whether it's like the service layer or like what's the domain logic or anything like that. Those things you might hear it, but you don't actually know it until like you're working in a team atmosphere or a bigger project that can kind of, um, show you what those are. And maybe that's just me. I just know it was beneficial to me.
No, that makes sense, right? And especially on the last part, the like the terminology. If you're working on side projects and you're working solo, like your level of communication that you have to play with is really like yourself. So if you're
Right.
able to like, you can kind of keep scraping by or whatever, making a little bit of progress. Like, and it's not that that's bad. It's just that you don't get a good opportunity to practice. Like you're not relaying your thoughts and how you're navigating things to someone else, unless you're writing about it online or you are collaborating with someone else on your side projects. You kind of get that, uh, I don't know, like this restricted view of communication, and it's really just like purely technical for the most part. So not bad, just you don't get to practice that. So kind of
Right. And
interesting.
I think there's like a level of like, especially in software engineering, there's definitely a level of like, you don't know what you don't know. And what I mean by that is like, if you don't even know something exists, then there's no way for
Right.
you to even be able to find what you may be looking for. Right. So there might be like a
Yeah.
like a problem that you're facing, but if you don't even know what the fundamentals of like what that is, and it's kind of hard to explain that, but there's definitely like a large amount of like, if you don't know, then there's no way you're gonna be able to solve that. And you're going to
Yeah.
need some kind of like steering in the right direction.
It's almost like you've been programming for a bit and then it's like two dimensional, and then someone like says something and they teach you a concept and now you can see like the world in 3D and you're like, oh my God. But like that was dependency injection for
Mhm.
me. I'm like, once someone was like, hey, like so the pattern that I experienced was, and I think it's pretty typical. If you're doing object oriented programming, you're making objects, and right in the constructor you're like, what are all the things this thing needs, and you just knew them up right on the fly. So you keep doing this and then you reach a point where you start to realize, hey, I want to test things, or you're doing whatever else in software development where you start to realize this seems like it's kind of nasty. Like I have the same like 50 things that I'm newing up in like these other 50
Right.
spots. Like what's going on here? And
Mhm.
then, okay, so you get into like constructor parameter passing, and then you're like, this is actually way better, except now I have this chain of anytime I want to go add a new dependency, like I have to start passing it like 20 layers down until it gets to where it needs to go. And then someone tells you, because you end up in this spot where your entry point to your program is now like 2,000 lines long of just like newing up objects. And
Yeah.
you're like, okay, so I made everything better except this. Like, what's going on? And someone says dependency injection, and it's like one line of code just makes all of that go away. And it's like, this is the best thing that's ever happened. So
Yeah, and but it can get like confusing if you have no idea what it is, right? Like dependency injection, then there's inversion of control, and you're like, wait, is that the same thing or is that different? And you just keep going down this like like for me, like dependency injection was your big aha moment. For me, it was caching. And like I've always heard of like Redis, and I'm like, what the heck is caching though? You know what I mean? Like, why would we ever use caching? And then just kind of like aha moment when we first implemented caching for the first time, and I'm like, oh my gosh, mind blown, right? And it's
right, but it took someone to kind of like steer you, to expose you to it, and then once you see it in action, you're like, oh man, like how can I do things any other way now, right? Like this is the thing. Like it's very cool. I was thinking back when you were kind of talking about your experience and saying like you had like a more senior engineer that you can kind of turn to and get guidance. I was even thinking for myself going through internships, like if I'm being honest with myself, I am probably the person that if I was remote probably would have done poorly, because I can remember, I worked at startups for my internships in small companies, and I can remember being like nervous and just sitting at my desk, either sometimes it wasn't even asking questions like I need help. It would be like, I'm finished my work. And I remember not anyone else's fault. Like I think I worked with great people, but I can remember being so nervous that I'm like, I don't know if I want to turn and like even talk to my mentor to be like, hey, like I'm done. Like, can I get more work? It was just like, I don't want to bother people, and I'm shy, introverted. So if I was remote, that would have been so much worse. I can't imagine that I could have done any work.
Yeah, and that kind of happened with me too. So I think if I was new at an or junior at a new company, I wouldn't have been reaching out. It's almost to the point of like, do you even know what to reach out about? And I think that's kind of all trickles down to, is this a dumb question? What am I really asking? Like, and
Right.
as you start getting more experience, you know exactly what kind of questions to ask to really be able to solve the problem. You know what the root of the problem that you're facing is, instead of just being like, I don't know what's going on. Like,
Sure.
you're like raising your hand. Can I have help?
Yeah, like, can I have help? Because I don't even know what I need to be asking. But this is it's something I've observed a lot, especially with junior engineers and interns. I've worked with interns my entire career. So I was an intern, and then as soon as I went into the professional world as not an intern, I literally had interns like working with me. So always been around them. And it's I feel like I kind of bucket that situation into like two types of things. And one is like, you have a question that, okay, you're stuck on something, but you're stuck because you don't have enough clarity around what you're even trying to go solve. Like someone's tasked you with something and you're like, I actually don't even know what you mean, but now I'm off on my own and I just don't know where to start because I don't even know what you asked me. And then the second part is like, I understand what you asked me, but like, I don't know like which path to pick, or like, where's the jump off point for this? And in the first example, I always tell people, like, if you don't have clarity, just like as soon as possible ask, because if you're sitting there trying to problem solve on your own and you don't even have clarity about what's being asked, you're kind of just wasting time. You might as well just say like, hi, I don't know what you even asked me. Get that out of the way.
Yeah.
The second part is like, if you don't have a jump off point, I think this is the part you really have to practice, because it's like, try getting something done, right? You understand what someone's, pardon me, you've asked what someone's asked you. You understand what someone's asked you, but you don't know where to start. So like, just start somewhere, get a little bit going, and then you can go to someone. And I always recommend that people think that person should be asking you, what have you tried so far? And if you feel like you can at least answer that and have a conversation, then you've done at least enough to have that and not like waste someone's time or not ever practice problem solving. But what are your thoughts on that? Does that seem like a fair approach, or anything that you might change with that?
No, I think that's a perfect approach. The only thing I would also add is for like especially like interns and newer developers, also to if you're in a senior position or higher, just check on them, right? Because I have
Yeah.
worked with interns and junior engineers before too, and you ask them, hey, is everything going okay, right? Let's just for easiness,
Yeah.
hey, is everything okay? They're like, yeah, thumbs up, ticket's going great, we're working on blah 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 blah. And then later on they're like, hey, Eric, I'm stuck on this part. Like, okay, like let me dive in. And then you realize that they're stuck on this part because the original 70% that they were working on is in the wrong direction. And you're just, whoa,
Yep.
whoa, how'd you even get here? You know what I mean? Or wait, what? Okay. Oh, okay. So you just created a new object. Oh, we don't need to create this object. Already is over here, and we can just add over here. It's already, And I think that that's a big thing too, is just making sure that you include everybody that's on your team into conversations, into areas where they can grow, because I think that's the biggest thing. And like when you're a senior or higher, I truly believe like one of the main roles for me on a team is to remove roadblocks for the team, to
Yep.
make sure that the velocity keeps moving, to make sure that, hey, the juniors and the middle level people are able to keep creating tickets, keep knocking out tickets, keep committing code, keep checking PRs, and not being stuck on something that maybe I can help solve, or maybe I could have helped remove the barrier before they even got there. So I think that that's a good point as well.
Yeah, and I'm trying to reflect on that a little bit because I've experienced that even for myself. Like, even though I've said I've worked with interns my whole career, like I think it's easy to get into a pattern where you're like, okay, someone's onboarded, you've checked in with them enough where they're able to say like, yeah, I'm doing okay, and you start to go, okay, well then you're okay. They keep doing work
Yeah.
then. And then your check-ins become like you might do them periodically, but probably what has to happen, and maybe I shouldn't say like has to, but what I recommend is like, especially in the beginning, like be a lot more hands-on so that
Mhm.
you can from the start get that person confident at least getting changes through, and you can try to catch some of like if you haven't worked with them before, it's kind of like someone's gone through an interview, right? You've read
Mhm.
their resume, you've talked with them a bit, and you're like, okay, seems good. But when they start coding, there's probably going to be a ton of stuff where they're like, I just don't understand this. And that's totally fine. So if you can
Mhm.
get them through the first little bit and you are a little bit more hands on, it takes more work, but you get them through that bit of the beginning process, pair programming, however that looks, enough so that you're like, okay, like you should be able to kind of touch code in this code base and not be totally lost. I think you can mitigate a lot of those problems, but it takes more work. But
Yeah, and when you do that, I think there's really only wins there. One, you would get closer to the individual, so you get to learn more about them, know who they are as a human versus just a software engineer on the team, and then also they
yep.
probably increase their confidence, right? They not only learn more about you as well and feel more integrated into the team, but then they also learn the code base and learn maybe their role a little bit better. And I think that's a great point to make.
Yeah, it's there's no one way to do these things, right? But I
Right.
think I think you said it really well that like the more senior you are, like the more time you can spend trying to help unblock things is really beneficial. But the thing, so fully agree with that, and I think the thing that people have to be a little bit careful of is that unblocking people does not necessarily mean solving their problems for them all the time.
Mhm.
You want to lean into like, and it depends what the problem is, right? Sometimes you're just like, you shouldn't be spending time on this. I can unblock you right away by solving it for you. But a lot of other times it's really about, let me show you how you can solve this for yourself. And that way you're not reliant on, like, you don't end up as Eric being
Mhm.
like, I have to go code on behalf of six other people now because I am their problem solver. Like, you teach them to problem solve.
Right.
Have you had that kind of challenge in balancing, like where people are coming to you and you have to be like, man, like they keep coming back. Do I need to like change my approach in helping them?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's a good question. So I have ran into it before, and I want to say typically when I do run into it, it is a mix of me helping too much and a mix of the individual not actually wanting to learn and just get their ticket done.
Okay.
Um, So most of the time, no. So most of the time, I do not run into that. A lot of times, when I'm trying to remove roadblocks to help people move, is if we go back to the caching solution, right? And say, hey, we're having an issue because of performance, because we're relying on a third party dependency that we need to call every single time, but it returns the same data every single time. So maybe we can just cache that solution and we don't have to rely on that third party dependency every day. We can just
Sure.
do it one call a day and then save it, and then we have a TTL that removes it at the end of the day. Now, maybe with that, we're like, hey, we need to structure how we want the Redis tables to look. How are we going to integrate Redis into our application? We need to create new code to contact that Redis and all that kind of stuff. So where I would remove the roadblock in like a situation like that, we have a team, we are creating tickets on implementing caching. Maybe I would take the lead or the initiative on setting up Redis real quick on, if we're using some cloud infrastructure, we can say like Azure, AWS, setting up Redis, setting it up within our infrastructure. Hey, our application can now connect. We have the dependency installed. All right, now we can kind of delegate maybe some of the code to integrate that now into our application. So I just removed the big roadblock of, hey, we want caching. All right, now we have it set up. Now we can delegate all the other tasks to get it working while I work on the next big initiative. And
Right.
so I think that's one way. Now, there's also definitely a part of it where it's like, hey, guys, maybe we can all work together so you can learn how we're doing this. But I think that really depends on the project, the timeline, the features, all that kind of stuff. So when I was mentioning like remove roadblocks, I was talking like take initiative of like maybe creating part of a solution that can now start being delegated.
Yeah, that's a really good call out too. I think like when I think about managing teams and when I have I've talked about this before on social media where like
Hmm.
an ideal team is not just like a team of like 7 of the highest level engineers. Like there's I think on paper that might look good, but in practice it's like there's things that you want to have a spectrum of backgrounds, like levels, like talent, skills. You kind of want to have a mix of things going on, and one of the reasons is for what you just called out, like being able to be in a position where you can say, look, like as someone who's a little bit more senior, I can take at least some initiative to get this started and put it in the right direction. And then I can work with other people on the team to help delegate, like to the most junior person. It's like, hey, look, you can still help with this. And it might be something very small, bite sized, very well understood. But like I've set things up where you should be able to do this. And you can take a little bit more time to go learning because you're very new to it. So you set them up on it. Someone who's a little bit more senior, you can say, hey, like this stuff's in place, but it's up to you now to go build out sort of like our core logic that's going to be communicating with the Redis cache, right? So you kind of set them off on something that's a little bit more bigger and scarier, and just when you have a spectrum of levels, you can delegate different types of work that say someone who's a very high level engineer, they're like, I could do that, I could go crank out 50 things like that, but like I don't it's like it's not engaging, it's not challenging, and you can kind of get those people set up on more forward-looking things or complicated challenges. But you kind of want a spectrum. Does that resonate, or any thoughts on that?
Yeah. No, that's exactly what I was getting at. And I think also like when you were talking, kind of made me like also think of like just because maybe I set up, or I'm going to quit using the senior engineer sets up the Redis, cache for other people to start delegating, but that doesn't mean the other people didn't learn, because there was also a point where the senior engineer didn't even know what caching was, or didn't even know what Redis was. Maybe that's like the intro to someone now learning about cache. Maybe the first step is not implementing Redis itself, but just working within Redis, right? Of a system that
Right.
already has it integrated. So I think that's also a great point too, that when you start having a team of more like diverse skill levels, maybe the staff or the senior can start integrating the Redis or the cache. And then, a junior person's like, I don't even know what caching is, but that now sparks some kind of like,
Right.
investigation work, or now they're working in cache and now they're like, oh, so this is how it works. And then next time they're now capable of implementing Redis because they know what caching is. Right. And I think just to kind of add on to what you were saying, I think that's a great point.
Yeah, you get like this like bleed over of skills and exposure where even the most junior person who's they're tasked with the simplest part, they're like, cool, but like I keep hearing you guys talk about this other thing and I'm in the code, now I can kind of see some of it and it's like, oh, like that's kind of neat. It might still be a little bit scary, but at least they can be like, hey, like you can start asking questions, you can start just having more exposure to things that you otherwise wouldn't have. So yeah, no, that's cool. Do you find in your current role, and I'm just kind of curious about like, given that it's remote, do you find that like team collaboration and stuff is I don't know, like I don't want to say at an all time high. I imagine if there's some remoteness, maybe it's not. But how do you find like your team composition and your ability to kind of work with others, like just given the setup for how you guys are set up?
Yeah. So I think remote. For remote to work, I believe there's really like two schools of thought.
Okay.
For remote to work for everybody on a team, um, everyone needs to be remote, and I think that just helps promote how we're going to be doing communication. So if everyone on the team is remote, well, then everyone follows the same rules for communication. If only a few people are remote, and that's kind of like how my case is, then it's really up to the individual and it's not really up to the team to make sure that the communication is high for the remote people. And I kind of like, so I think like a lot of teams will think we need to include the remote person. Well, I actually think it's the opposite, where the remote person needs to try and include themselves, because it's very easy to
Interesting.
be hidden. I think it's as a remote world. So I follow a lot of practices that I've made just from research and that I believe in, where like pretty much anything I want to communicate, I usually do it in our like team Slack channel. So there's usually multiple different Slack. So I rarely will DM someone like specifically about something unless it's like 100% just about them and no one else can get any learnings from it. So I will try to like promote it into larger channels and tag the person so everybody else
Mm,
can learn, everyone else can read, everyone can follow along with that information that's getting set. If we're talking about a ticket or a feature upcoming, we'll create a thread and we'll kind of recap what's going on throughout the Slack channel. And I think I kind of forget the original question, but I think for remote communication to work, it's either everyone needs to be remote or the person that is remote needs to really take initiative of trying to be extra collaborative. Um, because if not, I kind of feel like you'll start like kind of floating away from the team. And you'll see that in like Zoom calls. If the Zoom call, everyone's in the room and then there's like one or two remote people and like 8 people are in the office. Um, as much as you're trying to include the remote people, there's definitely going to be small talk going on that even might be about the ticket that the remote people can't hear, right? And I think it's really up to the remote person to take initiative and not necessarily the team, because they're just being human at the end of the day, right? I think it's not as human to try and make sure that all that you're always in front of a microphone so everyone can hear and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's up to the remote person to really take initiative there.
yeah, that's I like your approach of like basically public chat communication. I say public as in not to the public world, but like
Right.
just not an individual. So that's really cool. I've seen that. It's funny, like some of that stuff is like I see it happen, and I don't know if people are doing it consciously or not. Like it might have
Mhm.
just been, and I find myself doing this. Maybe it was just a convenience thing. I was already talking in the chat, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I gotta ask Jim or Bob about some other work, and like they're also on this feature crew or team, and like I might as well just like I'm talking already, might as well tag them. But that like doing it consciously is really awesome because it's like anytime I'm communicating, if someone else could benefit from this,
Mhm.
they literally just get to learn, they get
Mhm.
exposure, and sometimes it's not even for more junior people to learn about something. It's just keeping the team in the loop about what's going
Right.
on, and when more people start doing that, the visibility of all these pieces just goes way up. So it's cool.
Yeah, and I think there's also a level of so for like broader communication that works well. But one thing that I also try to avoid, um, and in shorter terms, like putting people on blast. Like if you find somewhere where someone can learn, tagging them and then making that public also is not like the best solution. Even though other people might be able to learn, you might be able to communicate with that person directly and then say something in the channel that doesn't tag that person or make it look like, hey,
Yep.
they started this, right? So I think it's kind of like a strong balance. But yeah, I think public communication within the team, especially as a remote, is definitely a necessity.
And that's a thank you for making that distinction, because I think that's a really good call out. It's easy, and some people don't realize this as well, right? Because they are doing the team wide communication and stuff like that. But when you if you and maybe people aren't even thinking this, but if you are going to communicate something that might potentially make someone like kind of stand out as doing something not great, it's probably a good practice to reach out to them first, because your intention is hopefully like it's not to be trying to make someone feel upset, right? You just want to, hey, look, like I found an issue or something, like let's chat through it. You know, you're not there to blame them. You're just there to say like we got to fix it and understand it. So if you can do that part in private and then communicate out whatever learning or actions are being taken to the wider group, again, you might be able to say like Jim or Bob is going to go handle this thing that was uncovered or whatever. Like it's fine. But if you're like, hey, like Jim or Bob screwed this up, like it's like you don't have to publicly put the blame out there. It's more just about like visibility into the follow-up actions. But yeah, I think some people don't realize that the way people interpret like how they're being talked about and stuff, like especially when you're remote, you're not seeing people's body language and facial expressions. You're like, is this guy just being a jerk to me? Like, why is he doing that? But they might be like, you know, their expressions and their tone and stuff, they might not be trying to intend any of that. So
Yeah, exactly. And I also think with being remote, if you use Slack, having, you know, quick huddles when needed, or if you're using Teams, having their you know, face-to-face feature, or Zoom, all these kind of things, it's very beneficial to still be in front of people and still being just kind of like we are right now, right? We could have technically this podcast ish over like text, but this is so much better, right? We get to see facial expressions, we get to have a real communication. And I feel like that's also a huge thing to have in remote. Still be human first, right?
yeah, I feel like it's an undervalued thing, and I get it. Like some people are like, dude, I just rolled out of bed, or like, I'm gonna be totally transparent with you right now. I'm not wearing pants, but I can do that, right? I can still be on video, and like, you know, but some people are like, I don't want to be on camera. I don't want to present myself, and like, I get that everyone has their boundaries for that kind of stuff, but the more people can lean into like, you know, if we can be as present as possible, it can make a huge difference for remote teams. There's not always this luxury, so I get it. But for remote teams, if you have the ability to periodically meet in person, like if the company supports it, like that can be such a game changer in terms of people's abilities to work together. Have you run into that kind of thing? Like, or I guess before you guys were in office, but do you have team members like you've never met? Like, is that kind of a common thing for you?
Yeah. So, okay. So when I joined my company, we were around like 400 to 500 people. I want to say we just crossed 5,000. So we went public. We got bought out, all that kind of stuff. So I've been through like a pretty big transformation that I would say is unique to most people, going from 3 branches in the US to scaling to slightly into Canada, and then scaling into Brazil, and now we're in India, and just kind of like becoming more of a global market from 400 to I truly think we're over 5,000 now, after we included some of the other companies. And then our public company that bought us out, I want to say they're like 50,000 people. So it's kind of just like there's so many people I haven't met, especially if you include our parent now. But yeah, and I think every time I join a new team, there's a lot of new faces, and we're pretty unique in the standpoint of like so when I think of like consulting, I think of like kind of like 2 or maybe even 3 schools of thought of like, you are an individual and they are placing you at a company because they need 2 or 3 new developers for 1 year, and then after that you're done, and then you go to a new company after that.
Okay.
Willow Tree kind of flips it on its head a little bit, where we do all in-house development. So a company needs a new product built, we'll build it, and then we'll give it back to you. It's more for companies that may not have a strong, technical software engineering level. And we actually do more than that too. I mean, we're partners with now with our parent. I want to say we're partners with like, Apple, Google, Microsoft. I think we're partners with a ton of people. And I think that's also like a school of thought. Like when you start thinking like Microsoft uses like software engineering consulting companies, like yeah, like a lot of like almost every company does, right? And
Right.
and I think um what happens is when we start new projects, there's always new people to meet. There's always new ideas, always new companies to work with. Like we're also very client facing, right? And I think that's where it really comes into having I hate using the word soft skills, but making sure that you're having
Yeah.
soft skills to be able to, integrate with the client, integrate with the new teammates, um, being able to have like these kind of conversations, right? And I think it's very important.
That's a that's a good segue. Soft skills. I also don't like using the word soft skills. It to me it makes it feel like it's like a lesser important thing. I don't know why, but that's the word for me doesn't do it. And I haven't landed on something I really like. Sometimes I just say people or human skills, but when I say human skills, it almost makes it sound like I'm implying other people aren't human if they don't have those skills.
Right.
I don't know. The, I don't know what the good phrase is for it, but
Right.
yeah, it's really interesting your point about okay, so if you're going to be doing say consulting in this case and working with customers, your people or human skills or soft skills, whatever you'd like to label them, that skill level needs to be going up
Yeah, right.
because if you're interacting with other people, like that's it's just going to be a requirement. How have you found that that has evolved for you? Like, how has your skill level and like the people skills, like how has all that been shaped and shifted in your time working with clients and doing kind of like consulting work within a company?
Yeah, so it has shifted a ton. And I think the first level to have a lot of confidence in the soft skills, it's because you also have the technical skills, right? So a
Right.
lot of times I think it's nerve-wracking talking about certain things, like maybe we're just talking something technical, but if you don't have the technical skills to answer questions that are coming back to you, knowing what exactly you're talking about, all of a sudden the soft skills kind of drop a little bit because you're nervous about the topic that's being talked about. The second point, my soft skills have definitely gotten better. I'd say communication has gotten better. I've always been able to like talk to people and things like that. I know some people have like nerves with or anxiety with that kind of
Sure.
thing, but I've always been able to talk to people. Talking with clients. So now that I'm at more of a senior level, I talk with more of the client also, with their technical direction. And talking with a client is really a cool opportunity because in some ways that can also be your users, right? And I think
Yeah.
a
Yeah. Yeah.
lot of times like you can be developing features or developing a software without actually communicating with the users because that's somebody else's maybe role. And I
Right.
think it's really cool and really fascinating, showing demos to the client, being able to talk to the users, being able to understand more of their business domain, how excited they are about seeing this application come to life. And it's a really cool opportunity. And just being more involved with that flow, process after process, product after product, I think always will increase your soft skills because once you start doing it, it just becomes natural, right? And you can start being more authentic. I think in the very beginning, it's hard. I think no matter what you're doing, it's hard to be authentic at first. And I know that sounds like kind of weird to say out loud, but like I know like when I started doing some like online videos, there's no way my first couple videos were authentic because I was like really trying to memorize like what I wanted to say. I'm staring at a camera, which is not authentic on my side, but you're trying to show
Sure.
authenticity to the other people, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I think just all of this in general, the more you do it, just the better and better you become at
Yeah, there's a like couple of things that I really liked
it.
as you're kind of navigating that. The one is that, and I hadn't really thought about this, but I think it makes a lot of sense. And I was trying to think of my own examples for your soft skills, and I like to think that I have some level of soft skills,
Mhm.
they almost can get reduced when you're less confident about the thing. So
Mhm.
I've been programming for 21 years. I've been in industry for 12 years, and I haven't had a team switch earlier this year. Now, I've been managing people for whatever it is now, like 12 years,
Mhm.
and even with that and building up communication and soft skills, I have found that being on a new team and feeling less confident about some of the technical things, when I have to go explain things, I can tell that like I'm focused. It's almost like I'm trying to play catch up with like how do I explain this thing properly, and then I can feel like my soft skills like slowly coming down until
Yeah.
I'm like, am I even communicating clearly? So I hadn't really
Yeah.
thought about it that way, but it's interesting. Yeah, you have to. You're kind of compensating, right? Because if I flip that around, if some I'm trying to think of a topic that I would feel very confident talking about. I like building plugin systems when I'm designing software. So someone was like, I want to talk to about you with want to talk about plugin systems with you. I'd be like, sure. Like uh I am, and this is an area where like I don't want to say I'm an expert, but I have a lot of opinions, and if people disagree with them, like I want to hear, and like I'm not even trying to defend my opinions. It's just like I'm happy to talk about all this stuff. So my soft skills in that situation, I feel like would be very elevated because I'm not worried about any other part except immediate conversation. So interesting way to frame that.
Yeah, 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 for sure. And that no, that's a really good point. And I've noticed that just where I've joined new products or new business domains. Like I've been on, you know, like a business where it's like, hey, I know what you guys do, or I know what you do. This is like now I can easily communicate what we're trying to build. Maybe even throw out like ideas, or maybe like AI is a big thing right now, right? So how can we integrate maybe a chatbot into this kind of application you have or whatever world you're living in. Then there's been products where it's like, I have no idea what you're doing. Like,
Mhm.
it's like, this is like, and now I'm meeting with the client beforehand, trying to structure their application or talk about architecture. And I'm like, to be fair, I don't even understand how
Yeah. What
this
do you
goes with
do?
this. How can I create a table or a SQL database for something that I genuinely have no idea? Like, I have no idea how these connect, and it's really just like, all right, now my soft skills are definitely dwindling at times. You're just like, this is kind of embarrassing because I really have no idea, I agree with your point completely on that.
It's very it's I don't know if there's other industries quite like this, but with software engineering, it's so fascinating to me that you can be like you can build up all of your, software engineering skills over time, and then someone drops you into a domain that's different. Like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something. I've never worked in like farming, right? So if someone was like, yeah, we need something built for farming and agriculture, you might be like, okay, I have all of these technical skills, but like the domain is very new to me, and it's like, wait a second, like if I don't understand it, like you need to invest some time to understand the domain, and I think that goes a long way too. So
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
The other thing that you had mentioned, and I want to touch on this because I genuinely feel like a lot of software engineers in their entire career don't get a lot of exposure to this, and it is talking with customers. So we were talking about soft skills and that kind of thing and why that's valuable. But the other aspect of working more closely with customers is that you understand like different timelines and constraints. It's
Hmm.
almost like if you go if we kind of think about software engineering as a bit of a spectrum in this context of I'm building either stuff at school or side projects, there's almost no constraints, right? With school, it's like you might have a deadline, but whatever, it's kind of the the constraints are pretty minimum, but side
Hmm.
projects, it's like you just kind of build whatever you want, right? And the school side, I think what I wanted to hit on is like it's a lot more theoretical a lot of the time. But then if you go the exact opposite end of the spectrum, it's like software engineering in practice has tons of constraints, tons, and sometimes those constraints are very tight deadlines. Your priorities are changing, so sometimes you have to be ready for, hey, we're building this thing, but by the way, like switch gears, like you're not building that anymore.
Yeah.
How what are your thoughts on how being close to customers, not just on the soft skill side, but from how you approach building things, how has that helped you as a software engineer like focus on what is truly important at that point in time?
Yeah. So it made me think of like a story that actually happened
Okay.
like last year. So I'm not sure how much I'm allowed to disclose, but
Sure.
I worked on a fast food ice cream place that gets millions of users, and they'd
Okay.
released an iOS and Android app. Well, for people to download the apps, we were giving away free ice cream cones, right? And so we would
It's a good
send
deal.
out, yeah, right. So you get a free ice cream cone, you download the app. It worked great because it shot to #1 in the iTunes store or the App Store. But and I was the back end engineer on that.
Cool.
But what we didn't run into, so we were trying to get people to download the app to buy ice cream cones, right? So we were doing different promotion emails because we're like, hey, we don't want people to just flood the restaurant and blow up our application because we
Yeah.
don't have like unlimited capacity, right? So we sent out like a promotion email at like 9 a.m. Eastern, and then we sent one at like noon Eastern, and then like 3 p.m. Eastern, being like, all right, now Pacific time is going to be different and all this kind of stuff. Well, in theory, it makes sense, but in practice, everybody wants an ice cream cone at the exact same time, and that's after dinner at 6 p.m. or whatever, right? So it doesn't matter when you
Yeah,
send
not
this
not
email.
the
They look at the
breakfast ice
email.
cream eaters.
Yeah, they look at the email and they're like, okay, cool. I'll just hold this until 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. And then so then we got like a huge flood of people trying to buy ice cream at 7 p.m. Eastern, and then 7 p.m. the next time zone, and then 7 p.m. the next time zone. And our application was, we were on Azure and our containers were filling up. So we were trying to do like vertical scaling at the same time. And it was just because our horizontal scaling was completely maxed out and our application was breaking. And we're like, all right, we need a new plan, right? And that was like an
Yeah.
example of like, we probably should have talked with, like, we talked with the client on that, but maybe we all should have like talked to a user or talked to like more of understanding how this can impact what's going on, right? So I think when you talk with the user and talk with the client more often, you really learn what is important, right? And knowing what feature to work on, because I think it's really fun or really cool to work on a feature that you think is really cool, but if no one's going to use it, it's almost like, should we be working on that, right? Well, what do the users
Right.
actually want? And there's a saying that I'm not sure if I invented or not. I post it on LinkedIn all the time, and it's, if you have no users,
Take
you have
credit
no
for it.
what?
Yep. I said, yeah, just take credit for it. It's okay.
Yeah, like I've been saying it now for so long. I'm like, I don't know if it's mine. I think it is, but it's, if you have no users, you have no product, right? And like if you create a new feature that's really cool, but no one uses it, like, well, does the feature really exist, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the bear in the woods kind of theory, right?
Right.
And
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah.
yeah, so it's kind of like that world. So working with the user really gives you an idea, it gives you like the narrow focus that you need to have a successful product.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think my experience so my experience is a little bit different now that I'm at Microsoft. I've worked on 2 platform teams since I've been at Microsoft. So the with a platform team, your users are still other engineering teams. So it's not like
Mhm.
I can't be like, oh, we don't have users, but you have to think about things a little bit differently because there's your users, which are other engineers that you can just, I don't want to say turn to because if we're remote, you can't just turn to them. But
Yeah.
you have other engineers that are within the org you can reach out to and have conversations with. But we still have like end users outside the company. But it's kind of platform teams. I worked in digital forensics for 8 years before, and that was very much like building a product that truly end users and customers would use, like police officers and law enforcement, that kind of thing. So I did not. A couple things I'll touch on here. I didn't have direct access to users. Now, what was very interesting is that the way that the company was set up, the feedback loop from users was very close to the engineers, which I think really helped. So tech support was always really engaged with us, or like salespeople would be coming to us and being able to outline problems that users were going through. So we always had like a really good, I feel like a good connection to users. So we had that, which I think was beneficial. The company did something that I thought, I've never seen this before, and I thought it was kind of like a genius move. But as the company was scaling, they were hiring in basically customers. So they would
Mhm.
hire in customers that had other skill sets. So, for example, someone who's worked in digital forensics but also in sales. So now they have a salesperson that like has digital forensic experience. So now the sales team has this like connection, like very close to users. Or we had product owners, or call them like a project manager or a product manager, depending on the
Mhm.
role. That were also like forensic users at some point in the past. So they started to embed these experts in the teams as, you know, they had these like hybrid roles. I thought that was a super cool thing. But the other thing that I'll mention, and this is probably more applicable for a lot of people, is if you have like a product, call them everyone, there's so many PM type roles, but like when I say product manager, it's someone who is basically representing the customer. Like, so that's the role that I think of in this
Mhm.
case. They're helping prioritize like what things we should be delivering to customers. So I'm going to also say product owner in this case, but what I think worked really well for us is like we actually put that emphasis and that importance on that person. So it wasn't just like, it's almost like the conversations were like, hey, like what do the users want? Like we would talk to that person like that was literally their job, because it is. And I think if you step back from that too much and you're kind of just like, yeah, like as a team we don't really know, and you're not like leaning into that person being like, dude, you have to be talking to the customers, like you're kind of missing out. So I was very fortunate that our product owners were doing that. And when we were stuck on something and we're like, which direction should we go, we would turn to them and say like, what do the users want? And they
Yeah.
either knew, like they could think through it, or they were like, good point, like let me go take some action and I'll follow up. But it was like, we have a user proxy right here.
Yeah. And like we do too in that situation. We have a person who is very, very, very connected with the client, connected with the users that know the direction of the product, and the software engineer kind of comes in, kind of on how to create it and then create demos and things like that. So no, and I think that's such an important role too, right? Because you need almost like that proxy person that can gather feedback, gather users, gather client feedback, everything, to really make sure that all the resources the company is, you know, using is actually benefiting, most people, right? It's almost like the 80-20
Yeah.
rule, just making sure that 80% of what you're creating is actually benefiting, majority of people.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I want to, I'm doing a little time check here because I know we want to get wrapping up, but I think another thing that we didn't get to touch on, and I want to spend a little bit of time, if you still got time, is you had briefly mentioned to me before we got recording about some of your, in terms of social media and your journey, it looks a little bit different in terms of how you started creating
Yeah.
content and what kind of launched you off. So you had mentioned that you got into course creation, and do you want to talk a little bit about your courses and where people can find them and that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So COVID was a weird year, right? Me and my wife were in our house. I was working remote at the time, and every night we were just binge watching Survivor. And I don't know if
Okay.
anyone's watched Survivor, but they're all like on Paramount, and I think we watched like 40 seasons of it during COVID. But at one point, I was sitting there, and my cousin was trying to get into computer science, and he was texting me questions about just different things of how you build products. He was trying to learn Python at the time, just being able to be there, help him throughout, because he wasn't in person at school.
Hmm.
He was in college, wasn't in person, and trying to learn everything remote. So I was there guiding him and talking with him and seeing the new, almost like someone that's trying to break into the field, seeing how they're thinking, how they're trying to learn, and it being COVID. So after work every day, we had nothing going on but Survivor. Um, I was like, I'm gonna try and create a course on this. So I started creating a Python course, and then created Fast API course. And Fast API is a framework for Python. And so it kind of got me into that realm, and I started creating courses on Udemy, and the courses ended up doing fairly well. So then I was like, all right, cool. I'm going to try and get to YouTube a little bit. And so I started kind of like everything that didn't make sense to go in the course, maybe like one-off things like how do I implement, Redis with Fast API, or how do I implement Redis with Python or something like that. It didn't fit in the course of learning Python, but it's something that people wanted.
Mm.
So started kind of creating content of one-off stuff on YouTube. So now I'm full video, and then I got into LinkedIn soon after that. So all my stuff is on Udemy, YouTube, and LinkedIn, all under Eric Roby or Coding with Roby. And it's been a blast just being able to share knowledge, help people, and meet awesome people like Nick right here. So
Cool. No, and it's awesome. It's definitely, you kind of said it before we started recording, but it's almost like a little bit of an inverse journey, right? I think a lot of people take to social media first, start sharing, and then they go, I'm going to start making courses. And it's just really cool that you literally just saw a need and you were like, I can help with this. And it kind of stemmed from helping someone in the first place. And
Mhm.
probably the thought process was like, if I do this for this person, I can help other people. So cool that you kind of just leaned into that and it took off. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and it was a super fun journey because like and I'm sure you can kind of back this up when you first get into really any kind of public stuff, whether that's building courses, making YouTube videos, making LinkedIn, you really have no idea what you're doing in the beginning, right? Like when I first
Yeah.
started making YouTube, like trying to figure out lighting, trying to figure out microphones, what people even want to talk about, how you're going to record, how you're going to edit, all this kind of stuff. It's quite overwhelming, and I think for me at least, I got in it at a good time during COVID because I think a lot of people were looking for the internet for resources, and
Yep.
I had a lot of free time because we weren't doing anything. Um, that was a good time for me to really kind of dive in, and you should have saw my wife's face when I just kept buying lights and buying microphones, and it was just a funny experience because like I started off cheap, and I bought like a really cheap light and a really cheap microphone. And I think a lot of people start with this kind of journey, right?
I did exactly this, by the way. So keep going. Yep.
Yeah, so I bought like a really cheap mic and a really cheap light, and I'm like, you know what, this is what I'm gonna try. And then I was like, man, I kind of sound bad. So I bought another mic and I bought a different light. And my wife's like, wait, you already have a mic and a light. I'm like, yeah, but this one's better. And then, 6 months go by, and then I buy like I'm not using it right now. This is like a web camera, but then I bought like a mirrorless camera with like a lens. And she's like, why are you buying that? I'm like, just to look better, I think. Then you buy a nicer mic, and now I have like, all of the like if you saw behind what I'm looking at right now, there's like
Yeah.
3 mics, there's a key light, there's a whole bunch of stuff, and it's funny to kind of go through that journey and being able to kind of, it's not just like one day you wake up and you have 100,000 students on Udemy, a couple thousand subscribers on YouTube, a couple thousand subscribers on LinkedIn. It's definitely a long journey process that you're just kind of figuring stuff out as you go, and you just keep creating, and you get a lot of.
Yeah.
And what's interesting too about posting public is, you kind of have to have thick skin. You kind of have to have two things.
Yeah.
You have to be kind of delusional, thinking that you can actually like make content that people want to, because there's so much noise already, right? And you're just like, how am I gonna?
Yep.
And I'm speaking delusional from my standpoint. I'm like, yeah, I'll be able to do this. And then like reflecting, I'm like, yeah, my chances were really small. And then on the flip side, just being able to post public content and letting other people love your content, and then also letting people hate your content, and being able to have thick skin just to kind of brush off um, the noise of negative comments from the positive comments of people consuming your content. And I know that was pretty hard. Like for example, on Udemy, I think I'm at like 10,000 some reviews, and and I have
Awesome, by the way.
fairly
Congrats.
good. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so it's about 10%. So 100,000 students, 10,000 plus reviews, and you get a ton of 5 stars and 4 stars, and you're like, yeah, this is great. And then you get a 1 star, and you're like, this is worthless. Or you get a 1 star of whatever, and at first it starts really like hitting you. You're like, how? And you're like,
Right.
20 hours of content is worth a 1 star? Like, really? And then you just kind of have to like put that behind you. And you'll see that in LinkedIn comments. You'll see that on YouTube. You'll see that everywhere. And I think the people who create public content, they really kind of put themselves out there.
Yeah, so thank you for for sharing that. I think it's important for people to hear that,
Mhm.
like, it doesn't happen overnight. Like, it takes a long time, it takes consistency, and it is an evolution, like you said, right? So same thing on my side. I got camera in front of me with a big light on it. I got two big lights up in the corner.
Yeah.
Did the whole microphone thing. I've had a terrible journey with just like audio equipment, but like all this stuff is over like the past 18 months, right? It's not like I woke up day one and said, I'm buying all this stuff. It's going to be top end. Like, even I had lights that were on my wall that when the camera was going, they would like strobe, like not
Mhm.
on purpose, but the way the camera was picking them up, they were strobing. And I'm like, I can't do this. Like, I can't, gotta return my
Mhm.
cheap Amazon lights. But all this stuff, right? And I think people give up for a couple of reasons. One is they start getting the negative comments and they're like, I can't deal with that. Right? They don't have the
Mhm.
thick skin to deal with it. And the other thing is that because it takes a long time, they give up on that too. They're like, I don't have the consistency. It's going to take too much effort. Why am I doing this? That's actually, I gave up the first time over 10 years ago. I started blogging, and I was like, why am I doing this? Like, it's too much work. And so that's why I started again to try and say, like, you should have just stuck with this.
Yeah, and it is a ton of work. I think that's also another thing is, and you do it like on a you do it on a different scale than I do. You knock out like 2 or 3 YouTube videos a week. You're posting multiple times a day. You're going like, yeah, like way more than the capacity that I could do. And so kudos to you. And I think what's downplayed is, like, let's say it's like a 20-minute YouTube video and it's about a certain topic. It takes the individual 20 minutes to watch if they watch the whole thing, and then 20 seconds to leave a comment, right? But on the other side, there was from the creator for a 20-minute video. I mean, that takes hours to create. And it does hit the creator harder than I think a lot of, I'm gonna say majority of anyone thinks it does, because of how much time and effort they put into pretty much doing something for free. Right? There's always an idea
Yeah.
behind it, but it's a lot of it's for free. And just being able to
Yeah.
just
My
consistently do
dollar a
that and
day
put
from
yourself out
YouTube
there.
is, yeah, my dollar a day from YouTube is not, it's not sort of making me a millionaire or anything like that. So,
You're right, right. And that's kind of where I am too. Like, YouTube doesn't do well. My courses do well, but it's more of just like, how do you just keep believing in yourself, where it only takes like a couple like people to really be like, I love your content, to kind of give you that motivation, and only one person to kind of ruin it. And you just have to be able to have thick skin to kind of like get past that. And I remember my first dollar on YouTube, and I was like, holy crap. And I'm like talking to my wife, I'm like, I just made $1 on YouTube,
yeah.
and it only took me 150 hours. Like, like like
Yeah, it's funny when I tell my wife that kind of thing. It's like exact same thing. I get super excited, and there's been times where I'm like, "Oh man, like if you look at the trend, I'm not making $1 anymore. I'm making like $1.25," and I'm like, it's like a 25% improvement. This is so cool. And she's looking at me like, so you lock yourself in that little cave and record videos, and you're telling me you make $1.25 a day, and you're excited? And I'm like, yeah,
yes, yes.
yes, I am.
Yeah, it's
That's
it's a
it's cool. Like it's really cool to hear like your kind of journey through that. So thanks for sharing that as well. It's it's extra on top of the software engineering work. It's great that you're able to kind of share back the information stuff that you've learned, because other people can benefit from it. So I'll double check with you offline to get links and stuff from you, so I can make sure I can post in the description and the comments and stuff, and people can check out all of your stuff wherever it is. But Eric, thank you so much for this conversation. Anything else that you want to mention before we sign off? Any parting words of wisdom for the audience?
uh not necessarily wisdom, but kind of just like a overall just shout out to you, Nick. I think a like
Oh, thank you.
dev leader at dev leader. You're able to just knock out some awesome content. And I mean, the YouTube videos you create on a weekly basis have so much information in them. These podcasts that you do, I mean, this is just with me, but you have so many other people that you're able to share wisdom with. You're also creating courses. You have blogs, dude. You do everything. And shout out to you to just be able to consistently be just in front of people and kind of sharing your wisdom, especially from your platform as an engineering manager at Microsoft. You have a lot of wisdom to share, and a lot of just that title alone kind of pulls in a lot of authority and trust. So just keep it up. If you're watching, Nick, keep it up. He's an awesome guy, and that's my ending clause.
Well, thank you so much for that, because like you said a few moments ago, it only takes a couple of people to give you some positive feedback for you to be like, hell yeah, like I got to keep going. So thank you. That'll be my encouragement for the next month at least. So
Sweet.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Eric. And for folks that are watching, if you enjoyed this, do what you got to do, the comment, the like, the subscribe. And we'll see you next time. Take care.
Yep. See ya.